Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The World Can Wait. We are back today talking about alternative education. What we wanted to do was continue the conversation from yesterday, from Saturday, in the vein of education, but we wanted to talk about alternative education from the aspect of there are other ways than what first comes to mind to learn to be educated when you're talking about education, right? So with most people that I've encountered and have had this conversation with, when you bring up education, the first thing is the school system in that city, state, town, whatever, and then you're talking about federal regulations and programs and things like that. But one of the things that often gets overlooked is other ways of schooling, of educating. Me personally, I spent half of my life in the public school system and the other half being homeschooled. And we have Miss Mary Rose here who's going to kind of touch a little bit on her experience with homeschooling and some other things with the school system. And then there's learning outside of the school system. I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we talk about school and we look at it from the lens of K through 12 or K through 12 and then maybe college. Like education shouldn't stop when you're not in a classroom anymore, right? Like you should be ready, willing, and able to learn anywhere and all the time, right? And because like learning is something that's mandatory and required for growth and for progress. I think one of the biggest issues that we're seeing in our day to day is either a miseducation or a lack of education that has led to an ignorance that makes us so comfortable with not having conversations with people, right? And so that's what we're here for as the world can wait. It's what our platform exists for, and that's why we're here to have this conversation with you guys to just dive into things that most people aren't comfortable diving into or don't really take the time to dive into because I think it's probably understood. We all agree, but that's the thing. We don't all agree and we don't have to agree. There's different ways to do everything. And so we're just going to be talking about some of the different ways to educate, to be educated and to just learn and grow. I'm going to kick us off with some prayer and then we're going to roll right into the conversation. Jesus, we just thank you for the opportunity to gather here and have a conversation on education and the importance of it. I just pray that you would use this time here with each other and with anybody that's participating in this conversation to teach us something that we may not have known already and to just enjoy each other's company. In your name we pray, amen. And so, um, what I would like to do is kick it off talking about the importance of education. So, Miss Mary Rose, I'd like to kick it to you. What is the importance of education? Why is education important to you?
That is a very broad question. I guess the importance of education is that you can continue to grow, right? And if you don't grow, then you become stagnant and you literally cease to exist in a sense because um, every time you look at a book or have a conversation, you can learn from it. And if
Yeah.
you are arrogant and, okay, put it this way, I always told my kids, you never want to be the smartest person in the room. Now, technically, you may be the smartest person in the room, but if you have the attitude that you're not the smartest person in the room, it opens up a world of opportunities for you to learn
Mm-hmm.
this in any aspect of life. And it's the approach I had. It's the approach I had when I decided to homeschool. Is the importance of learning and you can do it every day. Learn something every single day and teach something. And sometimes by teaching is the best way to learn. Right, to offer some kind of information to somebody, and that's the fastest way to learn what you know. If you're able to impart that knowledge to somebody else, and everybody learns differently. So that's the short answer for that.
Okay. I'll take the short answer and then we'll dive into the long answer a little bit later. Uh, Mr. My Trainer Kenneth, what is the importance of education?
I feel like education is important on so many levels. For me, just speaking as a black man, that's given me all of the tools to empower myself. A lot of times, as I spoke previously on your podcast, it took me a long time to really understand the value and the importance of education, and recognizing that education is a pinnacle part in getting from that calling to separation. I've learned in my life that most of the things in my life that I've had a problem with, man, I probably have the answer in a book in my house, you know? So it's just being intentional and understanding that that's where the value comes from. Cause it's like, we don't get paid for doing things. We get paid for ideas, So education, I feel like I think that's the foundation of everything that we have.
Okay. And before I kind of segue out, Mr. Mary Rose, it seems I don't know if you have the live stream open somewhere and it's picking up that audio coming through, but it sounds like you are you.
Better?
It,
Let's see. Do I get rid of this Zoom thing that's here? Let me see. I don't want to go away. I'm trying to see where I'm getting picked up.
If you have another device open and it's playing this, what it does is it echoes. This is that back feed. So if you have it, you'll have to mute it, take your volume all the way down and mute it, and or close it out on a different device. That's probably what that back feed is
yeah.
coming back.
I don't know. I don't have. Wait, let's see. Better?
I'm
Is it
not
better?
I'm not hearing an echo. All right.
Okay.
Are
I don't know what
okay,
I.
sounds good.
Okay. I don't know
Okay.
what I did, but I did.
Yeah. The
I
only
will
thing
learn.
we're picking up now is the lag, but yes,
Okay.
I understand. So one of the things that I kind of wanted to go a little bit deeper into is something that you just brought up, Kenneth. You said, one, you were talking about the intentionality of being educated and educating yourself, and two, you brought up, you've realized that if you don't know the answer to something or you have a problem, it's probably in the book. It probably in a book in your house, right? So how did you come to this place of desiring to learn and to grow, right? Because if I remember correctly, the other day in our conversation, you were saying how you had like straight F's throughout your whole school career, right? So how did you go from straight F's to I have all of the answers I need in these books in my house? Like usually somebody who is failing incredibly, throughout their entire school career, probably is like not trying to learn anything. So, what was the switch maybe that happened in you that said, okay, you know what, I failed. Want to educate myself. I want to learn, grow, evolve.
Really, I would say that the biggest thing. So the first book that I ever read in its whole entirety was 48 Laws of Power, and it was so incredible because it's like as I was reading it, as I was using these principles, I saw that it was working in my power, you know, and then it let me understand that what power really is, what education really is, and what responsibility is. That's what it gave me, where I understood where in order to have power, what power is responsibility. And in order to be able to handle that responsibility, you have to be educated in whatever you're doing. So literally, man, it just transitioned from I would read something, apply it, and it worked. And it was like, wow, all I have to do is read. All I have to do is read. So it was really a like an awakening. I'm like, if I all I have to do is read, like it's like I look at my life in totality where once I started refining, that mental, physical, and spiritual refinement. Refinement brings value brings significance brings influence. And it was just like once I understood the power of the information that I was taking, and as you spoke on earlier, Miss Rosemary, it's one thing. This is how you know if you know something, if you're able to teach it. You don't know it if you can't teach it. And it was just like, in the things that I've been passionate about, it required me to educate myself. It required me to be intentional about a lot of things. And once I started being intentional in my pursuit of, I just want to be the best at my field, it just opened me up to different things that I was interested in, different things that I had passions about that I didn't know. different things that I could try that I didn't even know that, man, I'm really good at this. But
Yeah.
that education, that one book really just opened that door for me. I would say that was like really the beginning of it. And it's like that implementation. It was like once I got the information, but the practicality of it and the fact that I could apply it and see fruit from it is what really drew me to it where, okay, this is my secret weapon, you know?
Yeah. And so
It's
to
the
kind of
knowledge in, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was about to, but you got something to say. I was gonna ask you a question.
The, the difference between wisdom and knowledge, the wisdom is knowledge applied. So it kind of goes with what you were saying. And that's pretty cool to hear that. Go ahead.
And so, you know, when Kenneth was speaking, he mentioned realizing that to go to the next level in any particular aspect, but specifically in his chosen field, it required him to get that education and to be strategic about it, right? And I'm wondering if that maybe has anything to do with why you decided to homeschool. Like you wanted to be the the person that you knew your kids needed, rather than expecting somebody else or another system to give them something that maybe they could have given, but probably wouldn't have, based off of the teacher workload, class size, and all of those things. So like, what was it that kind of really got you into homeschooling and then staying in homeschooling?
Okay. My I have age gaps between the kids. Two are 22 months apart, and then 12 or so years later came Camille. So with Robert, the oldest, had some developmental delays, and he was put in special ed preschool. And he did really well, and he learned a whole lot, learned how to talk. Actually, he learned how to communicate better. That's the better way to say that. And he was going along with this until about second grade, and then they literally took him from special ed to the gifted program in the same meeting. And when it was time for him to go to middle school, I was a little horrified because I had heard the typical middle school stories. And I thought, here's a kid who has been in school since he was 3 years old. Everyone knows his background. Everyone knows how to handle him, how he learns. And to thrust him into middle school where no one knew him, I thought, well, that's not going to work out well. And I didn't want him to hate school because he loved school. So I talked to my sister-in-law, and she homeschooled. I never in a million years thought I would homeschool. And we decided we would try it. And she said, if you're going to homeschool one, you might as well homeschool both, because then you're not tied to the school, the schedule. And as I watched them learn, and I watched how they learned, and I watched how I could be part of that, it was fascinating. And it became so much fun to do. And then every year they got to pick one subject that they wanted to learn. It was their choice. But we learned, and then we learned together. So I have a pretty decent K through 12 Catholic school education with nuns. It was fantastic. I didn't go to college, but to be able to have I had a good base, and then to be able to help them and learn together was a wonderful experience. And then we did it all through high school. And then when Camille came along, she went to school until first grade. I kind of wanted her to have that school experience and get on the bus and, go to lunch and all that stuff. And then she really wasn't too happy there. And she's extremely bright and wanted to learn a whole lot more than the school had time for. So we decided to do it again. And it was wonderful. And it was wonderful to what I have learned in my homeschooling. And I homeschooled back when it was 2 words. It wasn't 1 word. I have learned quite a bit. My husband said I probably have 2 degrees under my belt with all the knowledge just from the reading. And I also took advantage of meeting people and what they could help us with. So and I still, to this day, I still have stacks of books, and I'm always learning something, because it's exciting for me to learn, even at my old age. It's fun.
Yeah.
So I will probably always do that.
So you had to educate yourself to educate your children. It's
Yeah, kind of. You know, you
yeah.
learn to go.
So
Someone once said,
what?
how can you teach, how can you teach kids? You're not a teacher. And I said, I can read and I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and we'll be fine. And we were,
Yeah,
you know.
Mr. Kenneth. So I want to kind of dive into something that you brought up on Saturday, right? So we're talking education, and we're talking how it's something that you've recently learned how important it is and how valuable it is, and you're looking back like, man, I wish that I would have got the hang of this sooner. I wish that I would have figured this out sooner, right? What was it like being in elementary and middle school and high school for you? And like, what was it like in the sense of being in school and then being in school not wanting to learn, engaging with teachers who didn't want to take the time to 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 work with you in the way that you needed, right? Because you listen to Miss Mary Rose and she says, "Hey, her son had some developmental issues, and there was a period where okay, everybody knew who he was and what he needed, but then going to the next level, it's like, ooh, I don't know if I want to trust my
Mm.
child with them yet, right?" And so, is do you feel like maybe you should have been homeschooled? Is that something that you would have needed, or like just kind of talk to me about those years?
Looking back, man, it's so funny that you say that because I constantly reevaluate my decisions, man. And it's so funny because it's like that's why I side note, that's why I love my relationship with God so much, just because he's so sovereign and it's like everything that's happened, he's still using it for my good, you know. So it's like where now I'm kind of in a place of where I look back and I ask myself, why did I do these things? Why I didn't? You know, it was I remember in second grade. Second grade was my first my experience where I kind of I decided that I didn't like school. You know, second grade I remember I used to bang and beat and just a lot. I had a lot of energy, and this is when I want to say that at the time it was like almost everybody I knew was being put on Ritalin at the time. You know, so I was put on Ritalin. You know, and other things were transpiring, and at that time I wanted what is it, an IEP? IEP. I want to say I was placed in special classes. I was placed in special classes where it was kind of a stigma on that, you know, where and at the time the teacher's name was Miss Roughton. So it's just like everybody in my neighborhood in my community knew whose class that was, even if you didn't go to the school. Just because that was a place where we made everything. Everybody in that class was an object of ridicule. Everybody in the class, that's this class. And you know, I'm not gonna really use the terms that we used to use. But I mean, y'all get the picture, you know, and at that time, it just gave me a distaste just because one, I was embarrassed. I guess ashamed now, but as a kid, you don't really know how to verbalize that. You know, it was just like, man, I don't want to be here, ashamed. And it turned into anger. And it was just like where now I look at a lot of my behavior was coping mechanisms to kind of to overshadow the needs that I needed or the things that I just didn't know how to do, you know, and I was so problematic in school where it turned into where teachers didn't want to deal with me. You know, teachers didn't want to deal with me. So when I felt like I was made a target early on where my bad decisions turned into I had this stigma on me in my school to where if he does this, send him to the principal's office. If he does this, you know, so I didn't really have, in my opinion, man, individuals taking the extra time with me where I think that now just because it's like, you know, I am who I am. And it's like now it's like, you know, it's obligatory for me to read 4 books a month because I'm a leader. And it's just like I'm sure that I would have had that same passion and desire early on if I was shown that that was something that or exposed to it. You know, and I think back to, you know, mommy, and I remember it always being books in the house and mentions of it. But I don't think that I had the full understanding of the significance of it. Like you said earlier, knowledge is knowing, wisdom is the doing. That wisdom is the application of knowledge, and then that full understanding is bringing it all together. Where I felt like in my life in school, a lot of the adults they would give us knowledge. They would give us knowledge. Oh, you need to do this, or you shouldn't do this, or this is going to happen. But it wasn't given to me in a place of understanding where this leads to this, this leads to this, and
Mm.
where, and I don't want to say that it was anybody's fault in particular. I just feel like it was just the perfect storm. I feel like I had some teachers that really weren't fully invested in the education system. I know that I was a child that was kind of unruly, so it was easy to say, "Yo, I don't want him in the class. He's disruptive." And I think that with our parents, man, having so much going on, so many of us, and them working, that in spite of their efforts, it just wasn't sufficient for my energy level and my understanding at the time, you know?
Okay. And
Yeah.
I like that. You're sitting there and you're highlighting all of these different issues without putting the blame or shifting responsibility off of yourself, but then also recognizing like, yo, I was a child, so how much could I actually blame
Yeah.
myself even if I wanted to, right? And I think that's so important. One of the things that came up yesterday in our conversation was kind of the progressive nature of the school system, and I did Miss Rose, did Camille go to public school at all, or was she homeschooled all the way through 12? Because I was wondering if you could kind of speak to
Went
some of
K,
the changes.
she went kindergarten and first grade, and then we couldn't do it anymore. It
Okay.
was ridiculous. Um, I
Well,
know that the schools have changed quite a bit, and I know, Kenny, you said something about once you have a label, once you have a reputation, you can do something one time. And if you don't have someone who has a real forgiving heart, or the ability to want to help, and there can be a lot of reasons for that. If you get a label, it stays with you. It really does, and it's sad, but it's really wonderful to see you overcome that. In it's such an amazing way that you didn't let that hold you back. You just said, you know what, time to do this and do it right, and
Education.
that's a
It
wonderful
was
thing.
education.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It sure is.
I
And I
it's so
think
interesting
that,
because oh, good. This lag's crazy.
well, go ahead. Yeah,
No,
I
no,
know.
no. I
Go
didn't
ahead.
realize that you were still talking. The lag, like the way it came through, it sounded like you were done. So I was going to speak, but I'm gonna let you finish and then I'll go ahead.
Oh, what kind of one? No, go ahead. You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, I
I
was
can
I
go
was going to say,
drink
I
some
think
water.
back and look at my time in public school and in homeschool, and then the various schools that I went to in the military and online classes and all these different things. And I think that I didn't start really learning not just the value and the importance of education, but really how to, like, the way that I took until I actually got saved and started like studying scripture. Like that's when I really started learning those things. I just remember as a kid being somebody who just got it right. And so that was just like my thing. Like I don't know how, I just got it. So like, I mean, I was always good at math,
Frozen.
and it was like, well, what's the answer? You just Oh, is it frozen for you guys?
Is he
Hello?
frozen?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. He
Yeah,
is frozen.
I see you, and I see him. Um,
You were frozen
Can you
for a
see
minute,
me?
brother.
and I know where.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're back.
Oh
Okay.
Jesus,
You're,
I love the internet. I was listening to something earlier, and it was talking about how like we got men on the moon, but I can't get cell phone service in my bedroom. It's like,
Ah,
like yeah, it's so interesting, all these things, right? But no, I was saying, I don't know what the last thing you heard was. I was saying, as a child, I just got things right. I didn't have to put like in not all things, but the things that were necessary to pass, right? So like science and history, I did okay in them, but those weren't really requirements. Like the big things were math and English, in which case like I was good enough, or I was able to do good enough to just get by, and I never really had to learn anything until like the first subject that I remember actually putting effort into was psychology, because I enjoyed it. And I was like, man, like if this was all I ever did for school, I would like be in school all the time because I love this psychology stuff. But I only did that for like one semester, and then it's back to all of the other stuff. I always felt like history was some boring repetition of numbers and dates about things that happened that we want to keep talking about so that we can never move forward. And it wasn't until recently, and by recently I mean probably like a year and a half, 2 years ago, when I first heard the Hamilton soundtrack, that I was like, oh snap, like history is dope. I want to learn everything that I can about it, right? And as I'm learning it, I start to make the connection between what was, what is, and how we got here, right? Because you see that so many people didn't enjoy it, they didn't value it, and so they ultimately disregarded it. They were able to skate by. And so that's kind of what I want to jump into is, the ability in education and in our world really to kind of be good enough to not be good, because that's ultimately what I was. I was good enough to not be good, and for sure nobody, I don't recall being, having anybody demand greatness out of me, and so it's like I wonder why that's not something that we see in education or coming from the people that we were educated with. If either one of you would like to speak to that.
I think that most people are only consistent with being inconsistent. I think that when you're talking about greatness, man, or chasing excellence, that's something that we kind of emphasize in all of my business, man, that we're all chasing excellence, that that's the mark. But you got to realize this, man, most people that we're involved in, like looking at teachers, these are all humans, so we have that human error. So it's like, man, if I have a person who isn't fully engaged in the process, especially at a time like this where it's so much uproar with the teachers, there's so much unrest in our community, there's so many people that are in positions of power that are unqualified. So you have to realize
Yeah.
this, man. You have to realize that when you have somebody in a position of power that's unqualified, and then you have so many people that are following people and taking advice from people that are unqualified, we have a system that's perpetually going to go like this. So it's just like really where there hasn't been a standard. It hasn't been a standard, and the standard is just like, for an example, I look at like my household, all of the children that I'm involved in, and it's probably about like 9 or 8 kids that I would say that I have influence over their lives, where we're not even talking about grades. It's a standard. We're not talking about your physical refinement. It's a standard. We're not talking about reading. It's a standard. And one of the things that I've learned about all great men in history is their actions were shadows of their convictions. So it's like the kids and the people that I'm around, I don't have to tell anybody I work out. You see it. I don't have to tell anybody that I read. They constantly see me read. I don't have to tell anybody, yo, your house needs to be this way. You need to treat people. So it's just like where it's a lot of a mentality where individuals, man, there's really no conviction, man. And that conviction where, and that's why so many people, and it's like developing that conviction and that passion. I feel like that's the teacher's primary job, to pinpoint what are you about, what do you want to do, and how do you get there? Like giving you that roadmap, or basically giving you those steps on that path, like at least showing you the path where when you have somebody there for a paycheck, I'm not saying that, or you have someone who doesn't really have the empathy or the capacity, because it's like, man, third grade, I had a wonderful teacher. Third grade, I remember everything that I learned. Everything that I learned in third grade, I remember. I remember my teacher. In third grade, I cried the last day of school. I've never done that before. And I'm not a crier, but it was just the empathy. It was the fact that everybody in there, she serviced us, she gave us what we needed. And she understood, and she held a standard. I wasn't acting a fool in third grade. I never got suspended or in trouble because it was a standard. So it's just like when anytime there's not a standard and there's not conviction in the leader, I think that leadership's always the problem and it's always the answer. So it's like when you're dealing with schools where this is okay with some person or this isn't okay, or if I can talk crazy to you today, but today I'll get in trouble with it. So it's really no standard, and I think that's the biggest disconnect. It's no way to hold the thing. It's no conviction. You have to
Yeah,
like, it's like,
accountability is
no accountability.
yeah. Okay, and I follow that, because that's something that I don't know that we'll ever be able to move away from from that kind of thing, like as a society, right? Because like as you said, we're humans, so we gotta allow for human error. And I wonder how unrealistic it is to expect, like, in this organ, or maybe it's not unrealistic. We've just gotten so used to dealing with what we deal with, so we expect our principals and our presidents and our all of these different people in positions of leadership to be one way with us and then one way with others. No matter who you are, what categories you
Yeah.
fall into. It's like, I can think back, and there's not too many people that I met that were like consistently them every time that I saw them, no matter who was around or wasn't around. And I think that as that translates to teaching and educators, what you see is students who are like you and who are like me, who both have these great capacities to
Mm,
learn. And because we were just different types of people, I got treated a certain way compared to the way that you got treated. But ultimately, I didn't do anything either. You know what I mean? I just passed. And I think that if you were given the space to not do anything and just pass, you probably would, you know what I mean? Wouldn't have gotten all F's. You'd have just skated on by, kind of like how I did. Because, I'm like, I honestly look back and I'm just like, yo, like, how did I pass this long? Like, because I wasn't slow. I wasn't like an idiot. I could get things and I could figure it out, but I recognized my capacity to learn and retain information and to even reteach it. So I'm like, okay, I look back on my life and I know hindsight's 2020, but I feel like I could have easily gotten straight A's my entire life and then
facts.
gotten like all of these scholarships to all of these different schools and like and I think maybe that's part of our humanity is that we want to look back and pretend that our life would have been different if this and of course obviously butterfly flaps its wings and everything changes, but it's just so interesting like those seeing those inconsistencies. And I mean, it's crazy. I know you had something you wanted to say, Miss Mary Rose, so I will yield the floor to you.
I heard Kenny say something about, or you said something about accountability, and I think that for the most part, from what I see, people don't want to have accountability. So they
Facts.
shift it to their
At all.
leaders, shift it to the whoever's the president or whoever, to say if it wasn't for this, there would be that. And I think a lot of that is because people are afraid that they'll fail. And sometimes the greatest ways to learn is to fail, and then you really see where you need to make your changes in life, in any aspect of life. But I think that a lot of times people just don't want to take accountability for their own lives, and even in education, and even teachers, like Charles, you said that you got by and you just did what you did and got by, and Kenny, you didn't. A lot of that has to do with some teachers, for a lot of reasons. It's all a numbers game. Who passed, who failed,
Hmm.
because they're accountable to somebody else, and they don't want, it's almost like they don't want to take a look at their own accountability to their students because they're too busy looking at numbers as far as pass fail ratio with the classrooms. And then the parents say, well, my kid's not doing well because of a bad teacher. It's got to stop. We have to get to a point where we say, we all have to do our part, and we all have to wake up and say, time to figure out what our part is. I think the greatest compliment I ever received, and it was at different times from my kids, was when I heard them tell someone that and I did not do this. This was not my intention. They said, my mom didn't teach us what to learn. She taught us how to learn. And
Ah,
I kind of did that by accident, just because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I had to trust God to give me some guidance. But that was the greatest compliment that I ever received as a homeschool mom, was that I taught them how to learn. You want to learn this? Let's still to this day do that. I do that with my friends in areas of life where they want to learn about things. I don't always say, if I share something on Facebook or something and they have a question, I say, you got to look it up. You have to do your own school, your own work. I can go to the gym all day long and watch people exercise, but until I pick up a dumbbell, it's not going to happen. So
That's a fact.
you have to take it. I don't know bodybuilders, so I know about that. But
Yeah. Okay.
you could walk in the gym all day long. You could drink protein drinks. You can read all the magazines, but until you take action and have that accountability for yourself, you're not going to change. And you can learn great things from that, but it's accountability and not it's not even shifting the blame. It's just, I don't know, maybe people are afraid of being ignorant, which gets us back to the title of alternative education. People don't want to seem like they don't know what they're talking about, so they fake it. I'm sure we've all done that. I don't know. I took well advantage of the people that I met I find that to be too sappy, in learning with my kids. I took advantage of people that we came in contact with. Not in a take advantage of. If they had something to offer, yeah,
you use,
exactly.
not abuse. I feel
and
you.
I still,
yeah.
So,
Oh man.
But anyway, so because there are so many ways to learn.
Yeah. So what I want to do is kind of start gearing down the conversation, and is there some final thoughts that either one of you guys would like to share as it pertains to education, the importance of it, the value of it, why you think anybody that's watching this should put a value on it if they don't already? Because I just a numbers game without doing any research. There has to be people out there who don't value education the same way I didn't want to value education, the same way you didn't. And so basically, yeah, if you could talk to yourself in third grade, like what would you say? Somebody like, what is a message, Kenneth, that you would have to anybody that only you could reach with your words? You know what I mean?
I mean, I feel like that's so many levels of reaching someone. But I would say this, man, especially let's speak this, because I feel like accountability, the reason why it's not, because it's not modeled. It's not modeled. You can't do something that you're not taught. That's the problem.
Okay.
So it's like, and I mentioned it earlier, refinement brings value, value brings significance, significance brings influence. And when I'm talking about refinement, I'm talking about mental, physical, and spiritual refinement. It's nothing in here that you can do. To master something, it takes 10,000 hours. So it's just like, as a kid, like, if I would have been aware of my learning style. So parents, if you have a child, how does your child learn? Is he auditory? Is he visual? Is he hands-on? Let him know his learning style, one. So then you make his journey of education and how he gets things easier. Two, the second thing is, what are your interests? What are your interests? Passion reveals purpose. And when I think that, right, it's like right now, man, I just wrote some books, and it's just like, I went from not reading to becoming an author, all of these different things that have transpired have come from me educating myself, me educating myself, me educating myself. The trickle effect of that has been is, I don't have to ask the kids in my life to educate themselves. I don't have to ask them to work out. I don't have to ask them to pray. I don't have to ask them to apologize and for their actions, because that behavior is modeled for them. It's modeled for them. Again, all great men, their actions are shadows of their convictions. So it's easy to say, man, I care about my kids, I care about this, but your behavior is going to determine what you care about. Not your words, your behavior, your behavior, your behavior, your ways, thoughts, and actions. So it's just like with education, I think it's the foundational tool. Without education, man, I wouldn't have anything. Without education, education is what gave me purpose or helped me find my purpose. I found it through picking up a book, because a book led to another book, led to another book, led to a conversation, led to an opportunity, and that's what you're paid for. You're paid for ideas. Everything that's on the earth is made twice. It's here, then it's out here. But in order to get it out there, you have to educate yourself to do that, So it's just like where so many people, man, that if they were to read a book, it's no telling what they know the cure to, what they'll invent, what they can do,
Yeah.
what finances.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people that are talking about, man, they're in financial duress, and it's like, yo, it's a book probably in your house that's the answer to everything that you got going on. It's a book that you can read that is going to gear you to a conversation that's going to change your life. You know, and I feel like once you start reading, I feel like God uses books as a primer for things that you're about to go through. Because it's so funny, like every time I read something, man, it's not 21 days later where I can apply it, where I meet somebody that God has already primed their heart to help me in whatever my endeavor is, because I was obedient to educating myself. So I just think that it's, I think that it's pinnacle. I think that, I think that you're doing yourself and your family an injustice. I think that education is a responsibility. I think that it's almost, you're destroying your family. You're destroying your family. You know, like when we're talking about legacy, when we're talking about legacy, when we're talking about generational wealth. Once you start, because these are things that everybody's been throwing around in the entrepreneur. You know, we hear all of these terms now. Oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing this. You know, and it's just like the education where, you know, I've seen in this area, man, in the last few years, education has allowed me to continue. Just because it's been a lot of failures. Charlie, as you know, and I've lost all of my money at least 5 times, at least everything. But the books, the people that I've met has empowered me. And earlier, Miss Mary Rose, you spoke about failure, something to learn from. Failure is a part of the process. It's a part of the process. That's the education. You know, my second event, my first event that I do, I own an entertainment company too, called Bob's Entertainment. The first event I did was
Bob's Entertainment.
successful. You know, the second event, 100% loss. Nobody came. I done bought a DJ. I had a DJ. It was about 20 people there, but everybody in the room I had to pay. You know, I called my brother. I say, yo, how much money do you have? He's like, bro, I can send you. I'm like, dog, tonight it's 100% loss. Tomorrow night, I got to come back to that same place. I lost everything. June 29th, what, 3 weeks later, I had my first sold out event. I had to turn away 50 people and the tickets were $50, you know, but
Wow.
it was a part of the process. And me educating myself, me reading about other individuals, me being empowered by people's experiences, because right now, that's how I found books have been my mentors. My mentors are all through books, are all through podcasts and sermons. So it's like a lot of us are needing these things. We want these figures. We want, oh, I'm interested in this. No, you can go to Barnes and Noble and get a mentor right now. You know, so it's pinnacle, man. I could speak about so many ways that education has empowered me and really geared me towards certain things. And I feel like that's another way that God speaks to us, you know, and that's coming from, but I'm speaking, when I say God speaking to you, that's coming from living a vision-centered life, though. I'm not talking about somebody that's just doing whatever they want. I'm talking about someone who's living a vision-centered life, that has a vision for their health, their family, their finances, their future, you know. So it's just like where I don't read things that don't have to do with my vision, you know. I don't do things that don't have to do with my vision, but that came from educating myself and understanding what it took. So it just all circles back to empowering yourself. And it's just like we spoke about books, but that includes podcasts, that includes vision-centered conversations, that includes experiences, the failures, the wins, the losses. That's education. And the thing about it is, you know, the number one thing I love about entrepreneurship is nothing happens but I lose some money if I get it wrong. Nothing happens. But I learn. That's all that happens. Nothing happens. It's like, so I get the chance I can win $25,000 or lose some money and learn how to do it better. You know, it's literally a place of, again, it's pinnacle. I mean, I could rant all day. Like, it's like, I can't even, it's pinnacle.
Can't stress it
Educate
enough.
yourself.
I
Miss
have
Mary
a
Rose, did he
very
leave you
dear
anything to
friend.
say?
Yeah, I had a really dear friend. He passed away recently. He was instrumental in n- not only my homeschool life with my kids, but myself. One of the greatest things that he ever said, his name was Walter Williams. He said, "You own you," right? This is what you own. That's it, you. And you can go off on so many different subjects about that. But in light of education, if you own you, you are ultimately responsible for what you do with you. And that ties into education in a sense where if someone is willing to teach you or someone wrote a book, no one can make you do it. You own you, you're responsible for you, and you have to take accountability and do the hard work for yourself. And if you can do that and then share that information with someone else, then that's a great thing to do. And you're always going to learn from that, no matter how many avenues you walk down, and you may go down the same road 12 times, you're still going to see something different. And God puts people in our lives to help us learn and to help us grow. And it ultimately is you. You own you. And he always said he wanted to teach the moral superiority of individual liberty, meaning you are you. You are free to be you, and it is up to you to take yourself to whatever level you want. You're responsible for that. No one else. No one. Which is a really cool, and what a great privilege to be responsible for yourself and not have somebody else be responsible for you. That's pretty horrendous, I think. But here we are today.
I think it's scary to be responsible